So welcome back. We are pleased to begin Perek Yud, the 10th chapter of Igeres Tshuva, that is this third segment of the Sefer Tanya. In the original text of page Tzadik Tes, we merited to conclude the 9th chapter this past week. And in the beginning of the 10th chapter, the Alter Rebbe interestingly speaks about the same concept of Tshuva Ilah, the supreme Tshuva, the supreme level of tshuva, and yet the difference between Perek Tes and Perek Yud, namely, is Perek Tes it speaks about this tshuva ilah in a manner of, in the terminology of Kabbalah and Chassidus, millennia lamata, while Perek Yud speaks about the same concept of tshuva ilah, the higher level of tshuva, in a manner of milmata lamayla. Literally translated, Milmayla Lamata mean from above to below. Milmata Lamayla would mean from below to above. So what are we talking about over here? So those of you who are following, of course, know and appreciated, hopefully, the last chapter, Perek Tes, which comes the follow-up of towards the end of Perek Ches, the idea of Tshuva Ilah, the supreme, the higher level of Tshuva, that is the superior level of Tshuva. And tshuva, meaning the tashuv hay, returning the hay to its original state, original place, original position. From Daled towards till the end of Ches, speaks about the tshuva tata, or till Ches basically. It speaks about tshuva tata, the return of the hay, the lower hay, in Hashem's holy name. We know there's the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the two names of Hashem. There's the name of Hashem, or the two hays in that name, rather. Of course, the two hays in the name of Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Tshuva Tata is returning Tshuva Tashuv Hay, returning the hay to the Yud Kei Vav, and then Tshuva Ilah, the higher level of Tshuva, returning the hay with the Yud, connecting the hay with the Yud, the spirit of the Yud, Bittul, and so on. Again, we spoke about this at length. Towards the end of the 8th chapter, and the 9th following the 8th chapter, the Alter Rebbe says, how do we implement this unique oneness which is accomplished by the Tshuva Ilah, by this superior, it's a higher level of Tshuva. And he goes on with a whole pattern, how one connects, and particularly connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just robotically, or not just in a way that I follow what Hashem says to do, which is of course the most important, but I do this mechmas ava, with a true passionate love, which comes from a sense of clarity in matters of lukus, godliness, betuf tam vadas, lashon of the Alter Rebbe, with thorough reason and thorough understanding. Not Hashem is about reason, but in my mind, I understand the matters of lukus in a way that it has an impact in my heart, that it arouses and ignites a fervorous love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then when there's love, there's connection, and there's connection in a very deep and ultimately intimate level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Hashem, which manifests immediately through the learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, which is the expression, Lashon Alter Rebbe here and other places as well, the expression of intimacy with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through this learning Torah and thought and speech and maises. Action is the embrace with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so on and so forth. And again, the end of the message, this is what keeps a person alive, that he's able to connect to Torah through simcha, ba'ava, v'yira, with love and fear. So, we're not going to repeat the whole Perek Tes. I will just mention, as we usually do, wherever you're watching this class, which again, is shukayach to the hosts, and there is an advantage it's namely for the newcomers, that is, to go to the original website, tanyaonline.com, tanyaonline, one word.com, which the advantage is you have all the previous classes set up, this present class as well. If you're seeing this, you're watching tanyaonline.com, you'll see this very present class and all the previous classes lined up on the left side of the screen. Baruch Hashem, with the help of above, we're able to reach this point of Igeres Tshuva. We concluded Shayich of Emunah, and we merited to conclude Lukuti Amorim. I mention this because many times we cross-reference not only Shayich V'Emuna with rather, namely even Lukuti Amorim, and so it's a click away. Any reference that we have and we quote, it's literally a click away to see it in a bit in elaboration and in detail. Easy to find, also easy to follow the classes, as there's a separate scroll bar for the text. But again, wherever you're watching Tanya, wherever you're watching this, you have the ability also to follow the text. As we periodically acknowledge the Arutz Sheva, Israel National News English, for putting it up in such a structured, clear manner, which is again easy to follow on that site as well. And so we concluded this message in Perek Tes last week, and Perek Yud begins again with the same idea, Tshuva Lo, but Milmata L'mayla as opposed to Milmayla L'mata. Now, just to understand, the Alter Rebbe doesn't give over here precisely an example for this Milmata L'mayla, Milmayla L'mata, but in Kabbalah and Chassidus, we find this idea quite frequently, and one of the classic examples given the difference of Torah and Tefillah. A Yid studying Torah and a Yid davening. Well, of course, whereby the former is a classic example of Milmayla L'mata, a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming in a manner of from above to below, while prayer is about the person starting from the below and climbing higher and yet higher to the unhigh. That's the point of prayer. For that matter, prayer is called the Sulam Mutzav Artzav Reshim Mikiyashmayim, but prayer is called the ladder which is anchored in Oretz, and the ability of the person to climb rung after rung, which it says even that if different parts of davening represent a different rung, and a person becoming closer and closer and yet closer to the peak and the climactic state of davening is, of course, the Tefillah Midah, where the person stands Kamei Kuchabrichu Ki'abde Kamamar, like a servant in front of his master. The sensation is that connection, and a very deep connection, a Yid standing in front of Hashem, Baruch Atah. It's like halacha, even as much as Krishma is a time when a person expresses his fervorous love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but yet there are halachas which a person is allowed to respond, if not verbally, with a gesture. In other words, respond to another party as an example, especially when you're talking about someone who deserves a reverence, in other words, an honorable person, that you're allowed to somewhat make the connection, at least eye-to-eye connection, as opposed to when it comes to davening. There's no movement at all. There's nothing at all. To the extent that Allah deals with it, someone could pick up a sitter if it fell. No reason why you can, because it's going to be difficult for you to daven. But the idea is that one's not holding anything, as we know it evidently. We see you walk into a shul, Yid, and they're davening Shemoneh Esrei. There's no movement at all. In other words, there's actual movement, but there's nothing other than the focus on HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the connection of the deepest and the most sensitive levels with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is that's the overt expression, which is a result of what's going on, what's transpiring, the moments, the 5, 10, 15, 12 minutes when a person davens the Amidah. No movement, no responding to anybody. It's as even if a Jewish king comes by, in essence, you don't have to move, because he appreciates, of course, the idea of Shemoneh Esrei. When it comes to a non-Jewish king, he doesn't understand exactly why the person is not moving for him, so then it becomes a matter of life or death. So, of course, life or death overrides. The B'kuach Nefesh is Deicha, the idea of Tefillah, but the idea is that a person, for 10, 12 minutes, completely removes himself and from all connections to any matter between the other human beings or any other matter, is a result of the fact that the person is connecting intimately with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in those few minutes. In other words, it doesn't begin like that. It's a consequence, the reason, and again, the halacha will tell us what to do, what not to do, but in essence, what's really transpiring, it's a consequence of what's happening when a person davens Shemoneh Esrei. Where did a person begin? Just about an hour ago. What was the state an hour ago? Says the Gemara that a person, when he wakes up in the morning, there's no, it says the neshama is only ba'apai. The neshama, the halakha, is only in his nostrils. It didn't manifest through his entire body. As we know, a person gets up in the morning, there's a sense of crassness, which is kind of default, all those morning minutes or half an hour till he gets on to the road and to the to the path, or comes into the arena of Avodas Hashem, then things start taking shape. The neshama, as in the terminology of Kabbalah and Chassidus, starts manifesting from Ba'ape, from his nostrils, starts manifesting through his entire conscious mind, his heart, and his entire being. And of course, what plays an important role in that happening, in the success of taking the Eira Neshama and making it and allowing it to filter through the entire body, is of course the idea of davening. The person's sulamut of artza, person's well anchored into artza. It has a number of places, not only eres, but artza. Together with that, the unique pattern or unique opportunity of tefillah, of prayer, the person go from artza v'reishim magia shamayim. He could really reach hashamayim, the highest levels of heaven, which is again with a successful davening. We know it when there is a successful davening. It's rung after rung after rung. Each rung is another experience. If it's psukkah d'zimra, brichas krishma itself, a haftas Hashem lekecha, a person's able to ignite a fervorous love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the mandate, really, the point of davening, as the Gemara says, or the Mishnah says in the end of Barachas, it doesn't say haftas Hashem lekecha b'chol lipcha, with all your heart, referring to the love of the nefesh halikisa, of the godly soul, which has this inherent, innate love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's the chidush? Of course, it loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The point is to establish this love, that even the Yitzhahara should start loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Yitzhahara, to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the Yitzhahara. We know about the Yitzhahara other than loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yitzhahara pulls us, Yitzhahara, it's an evil inclination, tries to pull us into this which is animalistic and ultimately ra, even things which are Chachman against and the opposite of what Hashem has in mind, the way a Yid is meant to perform, thought, speech, action, and so on. But yes, that Yitzhahara, especially the way Rebbe explains it in Tanya, it's not essentially evil. It has that veneer of evilness. It's power that desires, and if you put on the right cap, you could channel it to desire lakus, godliness. Especially the Alter Rebbe established the Yitzhahara as the nefesh bahamis primarily. It's an animal. An animal could be domesticated. An animal could be educated one way or another. Can't compare the nefesh bahamis, nefesh halikis on the surface. It says a number of places nefesh bahamis has a higher source, even the nefesh halikis, but we're not going to go into it now, of course. But the idea is that you could establish, you could channel the nefesh bahamis to start loving HaKadosh Baruch. That's the objective of davening. And that's what Krishma is all about. But you can't compare that to that oneness which is expressed through by the Amida, because that's when a person stands with a complete subordinate towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, feels that Baruch Atah Hashem, talking face to face with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, standing face to face with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem. Can't compare somebody who's in the inner chambers of the king or standing face to face with the king. Well, that's a different idea, and that is the idea of Shemana Esrei. Where did the person begin? Just a very hour ago or an hour before that, hour and a half before that. Each went to his own schedule. Person learns Torah, people learn Torah for quite a few hours sometimes before davening, but generally the idea from the person gets up till he's holding after davening, that was a grand transformation. So you started from below, milmato l'maylo, sulamut of arza, climbed the ladder to become one, and ultimately, intimately one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the time of the Amida, the time of Shemana Esrei. Look at that experience, appreciate that experience vis-a-vis learning Torah. Person's open a Mishnayos and starts learning Torah. It's not him establishing the connection, him climbing towards the divine. Torah is divine without the person's input. Min hashamayim dibarti imachem. Torah is the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the first public appearance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah, he says, you know what the Torah is? The Torah is Anochi. It's not only Lekecha, the energy of Shem Elokim. It's not only that it's beyond even Shem Havaya. Yud Kevavke. It's Anochi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Let's see this explained. The Kabbalah Anochi is the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu embedded in Torah, enclosed in Torah. For that matter, the word Anochi itself, Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud, is an acronym of Ano nafshi k'savis yavas. Hashem says, my soul, I wrote myself in the Torah and I gave it into the Torah. I gave the Torah over to you with my entire core soul. That's what Torah is. Torah is inherently godly. So when I connect the Torah, when I open a Mishnayos, I'm connecting the Torah, which is already not only a part, not only connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah and Hashem is one. And I connect to that spirit of Torah. I connect to the Torah. My seichel, my understanding, I understand the Mishnah, I understand the piece of Gemara, I understand the Rishon, the Achron, the Tanya, the Halacha. I'm right away tuning into something which is, the fire is burning independent of my tuning into it. It's like someone tunes into a radio, for example. Of course, a kosher radio. What do they call them today? Whatever. A shear on the radio. The shear is going on independent of my tuning into it. There's nothing to do. The one who's giving a shear is learning an entire Mishnah, and halacha, or a daf, or a Pedic, whatever they're learning. They're learning. The independent of my tuning in, the shear goes on exactly the same, for that matter. The shear does not change because I tuned in. I tune in to something which is happening. And as such, I connect to the information which is presented in that shear. So too, Torah is a lukus. Torah is God Himself. Anechi Hashem Lekecha. The energy of Torah is atomic. It has the deepest levels of the expression, manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I tune into that. And I connect with that. So of course I connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the connection is starting in the onset from above, milmailo, to the mata, to me. In contrast to the Avodas Tefillah, which is just the opposite. I am climbing the ladder to become one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Alter Rebbe doesn't give over here, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nivoi. So the Alter Rebbe doesn't give this example over here, but it probably made sense to give an example just to get an insight. What is the difference between Mailo Lamato or Mamato Lamailo? While Pedic Test speaks about the same tshuva law, the superior, the higher level of tshuva. But that's tshuva, the way my heart is ignited. Of course, in my pondering on the greatness and the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that ignites my heart and establishes a true fervor, passionate love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Consequently, I'm learning Torah. I connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. From V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha v'yad dvarim eila, as the Alter Rebbe says, learning Torah itself is the expression of true closeness and oneness, an intimate oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Alter Rebbe has this also in Perek Mem Hey, in L'Kutei Amarim, the first chelik, a click away on the original site, towards the end of Mem Hey. And then he goes on, consequently, I'm doing kindness because I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu so much, and I embrace with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and embracing HaKadosh Baruch Hu is when I extend my hand to give tzedakah and so on. The general idea of mitzvahs here, the Alter Rebbe underscores tzedakah for obvious reasons, as we spoke about it then. While Perek Yud says that's experience, saying that Tess is experience from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in other words, from the sensation of God, which engulfs my whole mind and ultimately my heart. Consequently, I'm doing this which Hashem wants me to do. I intimately connect to Hashem through learning Torah, uttering the words of Torah, understanding, appreciating the matters, connecting my thought to Hashem's thought. These dapkas rucha berucha, which is again an expression usually of the intimate experience of the two spirits are connected. And then I do what Hashem wants, and so on and so forth. Perek Yud says that there is a same idea of Tshuvei Lot when it comes milmata l'mayla, from man below, and he climbs the ladder, reaching this sensation, reaching this experience. Now the advantage of the one over the other. So the advantage of Perek Yud, the idea of milmata l'mayla, generally is famous and obvious, because when I only tune in to this which is essentially, innately holy, what's going on with me, myself, my core, the way I am, what's happening with me as an individual, as a human being. To an extent, of course, Torah refines, and there's nothing like Torah, which elevates the person, puts the person, the Meiser HaAdam in Behemoth comes to learning Torah, the virtue of man, or the advantage, of superiority rather, of man over animal, is precisely through Torah, the famous expression of Rashi, in the Sugya of Shabbos, Peches 88, where the Gemara speaks about the whole Sugya, get a Matan Torah, whereby the Torah says the famous Kami Yosef Iki B'Shuka, how many Yosefs there are there in the market, in the marketplace, the difference of the Yosef, the way it's pre-Matan Torah and post-Matan Torah, and there Rashi uses again a word that doesn't even appear in the Gemara, V'nisrei Mamti, as he says, the Rabbi Yosef says, only through Torah there's the difference of me or the regular Yosef in the shuk, in the marketplace. By me, through Torah, I was elevated, I was exalted. Nisr Mamti is Miloshen Reimemus. Exaltedness. I was exalted. And of course, a person learns Torah, you can't compare. You see, someone learns Torah, it's evident on every part of him. Every part of the Torah learner demonstrates that reimemus, that exaltedness which exists through their learning. And of course, the more persons learn Torah, many times you could, of course, as well, a person learns Torah not just to, aggrandize his yeshes, which is an unfortunate disease, if you will, which exists. Self-centeredness, when that somewhat, so many times causes anything else than a refinement in a person's face and his posture and his composure. To the contrary, learning Torah in the lowest levels of Leili Shema is kind of ugly in a sense, but we're talking about a Leima Torah, a kosher Yid. From the free, wakes up in the morning, learns Torah, utilizes the moments that Hashem gave him to learn Torah, the morning and the evening, a Torah Yid, one way or another. It doesn't mean someone who sits a whole day in Koil, even a businessman, but he's involved in Torah Hashem. You see it, there's a certain exaltedness, there's a certain refinement, which exists, of course, through Torah, because Torah is a lukus, Torah is Aneche Hashem Leikecha. But the disadvantage over here is that it becomes because of the Torah that I learned. The core me, if you will, the crass me, in other words, associated with the Nefesh Bahamis. Why is there a crass me? Because we all have a Nefesh Bahamis, an animalistic soul, which drives the animalistic soul drives us to the animalistic, to the bodily, to whatever contributes to our comfort, and so on and so forth. That core, what's going on with that? Somewhat, the Torah, the learning Torah overrides and somewhat shuns and covers. It's somewhat, it definitely has an impact on the Nefesh Bahamis. Again, many expressions in Torah and Medrash and Talmud, what Torah does to a person, it does to the Yetzer Hara. Mashchei Beis HaMedrash, it'll have a deep impact. But that is coming hard and coming down brightly on the Nefesh Bahamis. Nefesh Bahamis somewhat will reform, will modify itself in accordance to the lichtigkeit, the holiness and the brightness of Torah. But what about from the Nefesh Bahamis itself? What about the core of the Nefesh Bahamis? Or the Nefesh Bahamis, the posture of the Nefesh Bahamis, the message of the Nefesh Bahamis, the spirit of the Nefesh Bahamis, of the animal soul, which we are so well aware about it. And is that going to just be overwhelmed with the Eira Torah, with the light of Torah? Or it has the ability on its own to clean itself up and to elevate itself and taka to enter into some state of reimemus on its own, to be connected on its own with the divine, with the exalted, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the answer to this is yes. This is the gift of davening that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave every single Yid, that he wakes up every single day. Of course, there's 3 times a day, davening Shachris Minchamayr, but namely Shachris, that Hashem acknowledges in the Gemara Brachas, Al Tikra Bamel, a bum, Bama Pashit. He's like an Bama is literally translated There's the Mizbeach, which is Mizbeach Hashem, the altar of Hashem, and there's the Bama, which is an altar which is open to connect to other to matters other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rahman al in a very formal manner, with a statement of a Bama, which is basically the way the person gets up in the morning. There's a certain sense of crassness, a certain sense of I, not necessarily in a time or space to demonstrate a sense of ego early in the morning, but I say ego meaning to say there's a certain sense of crassness, sluggishness, a certain sense of the connection, the animal, so to say, the nefesh bahamis, is pretty much manifest in the time when the person gets up in the morning. The expression begins, when the Gemara says Yifne and Yitel Yodov, and start that whole movement towards davening, which would mean getting up and climbing the ladder, or beginning the process of climbing the ladder, which Reisha Magia Shamayim. For that matter, it says in Musar and Kabbalah, it says Yifne. There's this simple translation where it's in Brat Nalacha, that a person has to alleviate himself in the morning, which is a good thing before a person davens, but also it's the idea of alleviating oneself from anything else, which is any spirit which is antithetical to a lakus, yifne. Let's get rid of it, and then come onto the ladder of davening. Come close to me. You, on your own, should come close to me. Where the problem is, where the issue is, where the issue of yeshus, or the issue of self-centeredness, or the issue of grossness and crassness, which exists inherently within Nefesh Bahamis, with the animal soul, which is pretty much manifest in the beginning when the person wakes up in the morning. Whereas his neshama is only bi'apa, he says, explain this. It's in his nostrils. It has the ability to manifest throughout his entire system. But how does he bring it into his entire system? Through avodas tefillah, through davening, as we all know it. He does negalas, he says brachos. He starts becoming close. He starts elevating himself, alleviating himself from the experience of animal to the experience of the meiser ha'adam min ha'behema, towards elokus, towards Hashem. And then when a person is lucky, he's able to exercise a healthy davening, and of course for that itself, some person has to have a schus. Even though it's avodas tefillah, the person could attain it on his own with yigias hanefesh, yigias basar. The Alter Rebbe explains a number of places in Tanya, in Likutei Amorim, that it takes toil. This Membei is the 42nd chapter in Likutei Amorim, and other places also in Likutei Amorim. Again, the first segment, yes, one could do so. One could work hard to reach a successful daven. The person has a schos or chman and a person's portfolio is not so, especially things stark stuff which are starkly so it's not aligned with Hashem's holy Torah. Who said not necessarily he's going to be invited or allowed to enter into the inner chambers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which that's where the Yid goes prior in his experience of davening. That's the realm where he reaches. Sulamot of Arts of Reisha Magia Shamayim, and he climbs, and he is able to climb rung after rung till he stands Kamei Kol Shabrich himself. The question is that is Hashem always ready for anybody to enter his chamber? Sometimes a person does something starkly antithetical to Hashem and his holy Torah and his holy mitzvah, sometimes between man and his fellow friend. And all of a sudden, what, you're showing up at my door? Why do you think I want to let you in? And if I ever allow the door to open up, who says I want to face you face to face? You've done something which bothered me deeply, as an example. That's why the pasuk says, "Mi yala bar Hashem," who is able to ascend to the mountain of Hashem. Miki chapayim bar levav. You want to go up to the mountain of Hashem, which, of course, it says Miyad Hashem. It refers to Gan Eden. A person has to be Niki chapayim bar levav, clean hands, a pure heart. But that's the grander, the macro, or the grander experience of Har Hashem. But there's the micro experience, the davening every single day. You're ascending to the Har Hashem. You want to go up to the Har Hashem? That's the meaning ki kapayim of Alibo. The clean hands and a pure heart. You're coming into the inner chambers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, standing face to face with Hashem Himself in His private, innermost, most inner chamber. Does it mean a person has to be a tzaddik to come into Hashem's inner chamber? No, that's the gift of davening. Like any other part of Torah, Hashem gives us the opportunity to connect with Him, even through Torah, through tefillah, through mitzvahs. That's what Torah is called nisina, matana. And Hashem is not necessarily scrutinizing us in a way that if you're not perfect, you're not coming into my chamber. That's how lucky we are that Hashem is so kind to us. And He says, if you're not so perfect, come. I open my door for you every single day. It's Lashon Al-Tereba. In the beginning of Geras HaKodesh, the first Pedic, he didn't later also. She mentions that first chapter, that expression of the famous expression of the Al-Tereba in the first chapter of Geras HaKodesh, which is the next segment, the neighboring segment. Yom Yomi D'Rishonos Hashem. Every day a person has to seek HaKadosh Hashem with His great kindness and compassion has the door open for us. Sometimes we do something starkly negative. Of course, hey, this something is wrong. As we can see in other relationships, a person wants to relate, a person wants to connect is one thing, but when there's a stark negative expression from one party to the other, and then one wants to become close to the other, no, there's something which doesn't make sense by all definitions, of course. But Hashem doesn't need that. He's not looking for the perfection. Again, part of the kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which apparently, why shouldn't He look for the perfection? You want to come to my chamber, have that oneness with me? Of course you have to be Niki Chapayim Avar Livvav. You have to be pure and have pure hands and a pure heart. But for whatever reason, Hashem says, come. Every single day I'm giving you the opportunity to daven. You could work on Niki Chapayim Avar Livvav, become more pure, more genuine, more authentic, raw, and so on, in your approach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course we can, and we should. And that itself opens more and more doors to us to come into the inner chambers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Understandably so. And the experience is different. But if we didn't get there exactly, still Hashem gave us the gift of davening. He says, as long as you didn't do something that terrible, come in. I'm there. I'm going to be there with you. Which is enormous. Extraordinary, of course. But the advantage of that, even over Torah, is that I'm coming the way I am, and I'm lifting myself up to you, Hashem. And we can understand the advantage to that, even though you can say, well, Torah is essentially holy. And not holy because I decided to open up the Mishnah or the Halacha. And you're talking about the essential and core holiness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't compare it to the person establishing that holiness, which is coming based on the person's climb, this is the person ascent towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Granted, but there's the advantage when the Mata elevates itself to the Maila, there's the advantage that I, the way I am, my animal soul, my composure as a human being, is elevating itself to the on high, to the divine. What's happening is that everything about me has a chance to refine itself, to clean up, and to become edeler, to literally more refined, and ultimately have a connection to the divine. Not only an overwhelming light from above, which is again usually the experience of learning Torah. And that's why davening is so crucial. Davening is so essential. Every day, because if not, the truth, the person becomes more and more refined, but there's something in the core which is just being overwhelmed, but you're not dealing with the issue. You're not dealing with the problem, if you will. Davening allows the person to deal with the problem, that the problem itself, that the Yetzer Hara should start loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then if Shemahamis should start appreciating God, godliness, an animal soul which drives the person to the animalistic, to the bodily, and so on, should start loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's stupendous. Appreciating Elokus and Vahavto. It's not a badge, Ayev Hashem. It's about the Nefesh Mahamis loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's beyond extraordinary. A nefesh bahamis should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's for real. Torah says a pasuk in Torah, Hashem Elokecha. So that is the way it really, if a person has a successful davening, he could truly establish that nefesh bahamis, the animal soul, the animal drive, could say, hey, there's something sublime, there's something special that I can introduce into my life. And in the end, nefesh bahamis, yes, introduces it, appreciates matters of godliness, and yes, starts loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, true fervor, passionate love from an animal soul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is beyond extraordinary. And that is why davening is so special. Davening is so significant. So what we see over here, just again as an example, the milmailo lamata and milmata lamailo. And Alter Rebbe says Tshuva Ilo also has these two experiences. So, of course, we took not too much. We had to, it's good to get some understanding. The reason we took the time just to get that understanding, that a connection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, same HaKadosh Baruch Hu, understandably, but it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the connection of Milmaila Lamata or Milmata Lamaila, and the advantage or virtue of both of them. So Alter Rebbe says, we can just read a few lines over here, but I'm look forward to continuing the following week. So Tshuva Ilozu, this Dapkas Rucha Barucha, Al Dei Terug Milas Chasadim, this Tshuva, the superior level of Tshuva, of the connection and the adherence of spirit to spirit with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the cleave of spirit to spirit, which is again an expression of true passionate closeness, intimate closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, described in the previous chapter, which would ultimately lead the person to learn Torah and to do Gemilas Chasadim, Ali Dei Teirig Gemilas Chasadim, learning Torah, and acts of kindness. This is Amshachim B'Mayla L'Mata. This is from above to below. As we explained before, the person's overwhelmed, and it manifests in his learning Torah and his doing mitzvahs, Dvar Hashem Mamash B'Fiv, that the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the person's mouth, consequent to his experience. Basim Dvarai B'Ficha, my words are in your mouth. It's Hashem's words in the mouth of the Yid of learning Torah, because he's overwhelmed with elokus, with godliness. V'minoi techapkeni, and it comes milmayla lamata. So it's Hashem's words. You see over here in this expression itself, milmayla lamata, my words of Torah in your mouth, my right hand embracing you, which is the Gemilas Chasadim Chesed Re'imina, which manifests in my doing kindness, because kindness is the right hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when I'm connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my hand is doing kindness, consequent to that connection of Hashem, which is again the experience of Pirik Tes. But the same token, man, which is Tachtein. You have to explain why. The lowly man, or is not coming to say how the lowliness of man, just the man which is on the level of this lower plane. He has to go from one level to another, milmata l'mayla, from below to above, which is also Tshuva, and also reach the Istapkas Rucha Berucha, the cleave of spirit to spirit, which is also a closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, an intimate closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that comes b'kavanas halev, through the intent of the heart, bitfila, intention of the heart, bitfila, in prayer, particularly with Kriyashma and the Birchas Kriyashma Kedelim Revahafta B'chol Vav B'chol Nafshecha B'emes Lamita, in order to say and to experience the love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ahafta, you should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and again, not just to say, but B'emes La'amite, well, double, B'emes La'amite, it should also engulf your entire heart and your entire soul. We will continue B'ez Hashem, but that's a different experience of the Mata L'mayla. So with Torah, as Alter Rebbe uses also, the Gapkas Rucha Berucha through Torah also exists. And again, we explained it. Alter Rebbe says in Perek Mem Hey, learning Torah Be'iyu, and especially uttering the words of Torah, is an intimate experience with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can see it in the end of the chapter, Mem Hey in L'Kuti Amarim, the first segment, and click away. And Alter Rebbe says this over here also. But that's coming from the perspective of Milmayla Lamata, again as explained and articulated in Perek Tes. While Perek Yud, you're reaching the same expression. And yes, davening, a person has the ability to reach that intimate closeness with Hashem. That's the point of davening. The ultimate closeness is by Shemona Esrei. Yes, it's an intimate closeness. It's also Dapkas Rucha Berucha. Similar expression over here in this chapter. But that's coming from the person elevating himself one rung after the other and he reaches the Vahavta, that fervorous love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then the connection, the intimate connection with Hashem, Baruch Atah Hashem, which is again all the brachas in the Tfilas HaAmidah. How did you reach there? You reach there from below to above. So you're going to end up in the same Tshuvei Lah, while Tshuvei Lah in Perek Tes is Milmayla Lamata. Here it's Milmata Lamayla. We look forward to continuing on this subject this coming week. Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarich. Have a wonderful night.